We're taking what would otherwise be wasted or discarded, upcycling, and then creating more value through biotechnology.
Hey, Karl, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm in Southern California. I'm actually in Ventura visiting my parents, and you are in New York. What's going on with you?
Oh, yeah. I feel like I'm in that dream. I don't know if you had this dream where you forget to study for an exam or you didn't know you were enrolled in a class and then it's finals week. And then you're like, oh, crap, I have to take this exam and you're not prepared.
Yeah, I've had that dream.
Oh my God. Yeah, I've had it several times, but I feel like I'm living it with the election and things that are going on in this country. Like there's so much news and a lot of it had caused a bit of anxiety for me. So I don't watch as much, but then I forget what the candidates stand for and what's going on. And yeah, so I'm just trying to catch up and be American and cast my vote. How about you?
It's very hard to ignore that anxiety. I think many people are feeling that. A lot of us remember the results of the 2016 election and that you could actually feel the anxiety that was in the air at the end of that cycle. I hope we don't go through that again. I'm in California and have been watching the World Series, which has been very exciting. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but at this point, the Dodgers are up 3. The Yankees have been not performing so well, though last night they did hit a home run at the 9th inning and scored 2 runs, but the Dodgers still won. So the Dodgers are up 3 at this point, and if they win tonight, they'll win the World Series. It'll be a rout.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there you go, people. Not only do you get biotech news, but political coverage and you get sports coverage. We're expanding. I'm just kidding. No,
Yeah.
but there's been news. There's been news in biotech. What's going on, Karl?
So I was really excited about this biotech news that came out last week. There's been a lot of really interesting things, but I'm only going to cover one piece of it. And that is scientists found this new way to encode DNA using digital data. And I think our listeners should know or may know that people have been looking at DNA as a storage medium. And we're actually going to have a podcast where one of our guests is going to talk about how all these AI companies are investing in nuclear because AI uses a lot of power. And that makes a lot of sense because nuclear power is very clean once you get the facility set up. And we've seen through the Biden administration more investment and more interest in nuclear. However, you might not need as much power if you start to encode DNA, and some of these big data centers would use DNA as a storage medium, but we haven't gotten to the point where that's not just feasible, but feasible in a way that's going to be really fast. And so what these scientists predicted was a faster way to encode DNA. And this was an international team of scientists, molecular biologists, computer scientists, and physicists that found that they could encode data onto DNA 350 times faster than current approaches.
Wow.
So, yeah. It was a wow. It was one of those where I was like, this is incredible. And our guest that we're going to talk to in a couple of weeks was like, why are we investing in all this nuclear? Why are not more people looking at DNA storage for data centers? But I just don't think we're there. We're not at the scale yet. It's probably 10 or 15 years away. So yeah, we'll develop more nuclear, which will be clean, but then we'll also be developing these DNA storage devices, which will be even more clean. So
yeah, we should bring our friend Kyle Tomek back on. This is what he's been working on from an academic level, from a commercial level. So what does he think about this new development in accelerated DNA encoding?
Yeah.
And there's been another startup that had reached out to me that's doing this based in India. And that was exciting that people are looking at this and making it a venture-backed company. All the specifics, I don't know. I mean, some people gravitate towards venture capital because they think that's what they need to do. But sometimes when it comes to science, I'm not sure if that's the best way in the early stages. Anyway, I'm digressing.
But you're not, because it actually brings up something that we had on our list of topics for the day. You're talking about whether a company should be venture-backed or not. And I think a lot of startups or a lot of founders might not know what that means. And we operate the Messaging Lab, which is a strategic communications company, but we also serve as mentors at a couple of different accelerator or incubator programs. So we do talk to a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, and that is something that brings us a lot of joy. It keeps us on the edge of technology. It forces us to constantly learn. It exercises our curiosity, which is part of the reason why we do this podcast. And what's your take on mentoring, Erum? I think we talked about it a little bit. I don't think we want to go into too much detail today.
Yeah, you're right. I really enjoy talking to different startups because, again, learning, you definitely see all the different business models and approaches and the technology and how they try to differentiate themselves from other companies. So huge learning. I'm excited to talk more about it. There's another level when it comes to mentoring, and that is the relationship between mentors and mentees. And I think that's something that we should explore more, because there are founders that I see that are leveraging their mentors very successfully. They are making those deeper relationships. They're finding out more about their mentor, about their connections, and asking questions and trying to give back and making it not weird. But then on the flip side, there's some founders that ask for so many different things, but they're not ready to get those answers. They're not prepared. And mentors, I mean, like you and I were just like, yeah, we'll make these connections. Like, because especially if we're part of a program and that program is led by people that we love and we want to help. We want to help all of these companies rise up. But then if you don't have the ability to, let's say, accept 5 really strong connections, you don't have your blurbs ready, you don't have that pitch deck ready, then it starts to create a little bit of a tension because we assumed you're buttoned up, but maybe that's not the case. Anyway, I think it's something that we can talk about, not just in the startup world, but everyone has mentors. And we both have stories on both sides where we were mentees early stage and early part of our career, and how those mentors really helped us skyrocket into our careers. Or not that we're billionaires, but you know what I mean. It just really helped us level up our game. And then on the other side, being a mentor, and I still have mentors. I still do. And I really cherish those relationships and I hold them really close to my heart and facilitate a friendship first and see how I can help them with their efforts. And then I'm like, okay, here's something that I need help with, and then reach out to them. So anyway, we should definitely dive in more and ask some questions. Let's ask our audience if you have any questions about what a mentor-mentee relationship should look like, or what are some challenges that you might have, or what kind of playbooks would you like to look at. Just send us some questions, send up some comments, and then we can dive a little bit deeper, because that is something that helps elevate everyone's career, not just in biotech, which is what we're focused on, but across all industries.
Well, I think that a lot of people are probably turning to AI these days to be their mentors. And I think that AI can probably be super useful in serving as a mentor. One of the things about using AI is you don't have the personal connection with someone else. And I might not be able to draw upon, like you mentioned, networks that we have. AI definitely doesn't do that. But I think each of us probably have our own AI experiences. You and I were talking about our friend Ed and his use of ChatGPT as a doctor. Why don't you tell that story? And then I have a question for you.
Yes. Yes. Ed is a very, very dear friend, always living on the edge of technology. So he's mature, let's just say. So he's been experiencing some of the aches and pains of growing older. And I'm not going to give his personal health information, but he had a little situation and it was bothering him. So he made a doctor's appointment. And before he went to the doctor's appointment, he had a conversation with ChatGPT about, here's how I'm feeling. What are some treatments out there? What do I need to do? Tell me how I can get better in the next 2 weeks. So ChatGPT listed all these things. That's what, I don't know how does ChatGPT sound. I haven't used the audio version of it, but if there is one, I don't know yet. Probably.
Yeah, no, I know Ed actually talks to ChatGPT. He told me that. I had a conversation about it.
Oh, yeah. So maybe he was talking to ChatGPT. So ChatGPT shared all this information and he was like, okay. It was very clear, very directive. And it told him it was like a pain on his body. So make a formulation using turmeric and this and that and a few different materials. And like he applied it to his skin for like 1 hour with a gauze patch. He felt better within 2-3 days. And then he went to his doctor and he just let his doctor do the doctor thing and ask questions and give a diagnosis and a treatment. He was like, okay, it was like very basic feedback. And then he printed out the ChatGPT dialogue and gave it to the doctor. And the doctor read it. And the doctor said, I'm out of a job.
Wow. Amazing.
Because he was like, this is a very good analysis. And instead of, and I don't know what the doctor prescribed, but what ChatGPT suggested wasn't just to get a pill or something like that. It was like, hey, look, here are some household ingredients. You just got to mash them together, heat it up a little bit, and then apply it. So that was the thing. And I was like, wow, you use it for that? And I'm like, I wonder how I could use it for my health and wellness.
All right. Well, before we go on, I'm going to say we're not offering medical advice in any way.
Yes. Yes.
And
Please consult your physicians.
yeah, and I consulted ChatGPT after that story for an injury that I have that I've been dealing with. And I was actually surprised by the results that it gave me back. It was also very much like what Ed experienced in terms of, hey, physical therapy for this, here's what you might want to consider taking for the pain, and a couple of other things like that, which really surprised me. And I mean, like we said at the top of the episode, I'm in California with my parents. I've gone with my parents to a couple of medical procedures. And even today, what amazes me is that they have to fill out all these forms. And when I did digital health back in the early 2000s, I thought that this would have been solved by now. I mean, here we are. It's going to be 2025 in a couple of weeks. We still have to, by paper, fill out all these forms. It's just ridiculous. But I'm digressing.
No, we keep thinking we digress, but we don't. It is very interesting, I would say, just because the healthcare system is a bit challenging. I don't think anyone would deny that. I respect doctors. I respect the craft, but it's also that there are so many people and there's a lot of information that reveals itself. So there's so much research that's happening at a faster pace that I think it's a bit unfair to doctors. There's a lot of pressure being put on them in terms of being all-knowing and diagnosing. There's several books about this. I think one book is called The Patient Will See You Now. It was about patients being more empowered with information and doctors being more like a guide or like a wellness coach almost, and helping decipher some information. But deciphering too, that's like what AI is really good at. It's deciphering information. And then you have all of the information from history, from our ancestors. I mean, there's so much learnings over thousands of years in Chinese medicine, in Ayurvedic medicine. And when I lived in Malaysia, I would see a Chinese medicine doctor and I had shoulder pain, and they did something similar where they created like a mashup of herbs and different things and they applied it. And yes, it felt great. It was a little messy. So that was one thing, but that can all be figured out. So there's definitely a good balance between looking at AI, consulting with other professionals in the space, and coming up with the best treatment for yourself, whether it's a treatment for a disease or guidance on how to be healthier for longer.
Yes, absolutely. I think there is thousands of years of medicine, and I think that AI is really going to transform that. We were trying to get Martin Shkreli on for a while because you'd seen him at DSci NY, and he had launched a chat-based doctor product. And I heard him talk on a podcast where he was saying he believes that's going to be a huge thing. And I agree, because given the pressure that doctors are under and the issues with our healthcare system, I think that kind of AI-based doctor is something that many people are going to turn to. And there'll be different levels of what that looks like.
Yeah. And another thing too, I mean, Ed had added some of, I think, his medical records, but let's think about uploading our sequences, our diets. If AI had access to that information, the ability to make suggestions. I think that's a big thing when you're working with AI. It's a suggestion. It's a recommendation. It's not bond. It's not like it knows every single thing. Everything's with a grain of salt. But I think that's going to be really interesting. I want to try that. I mean, once I have my DNA analysis from 23andMe, I'll try it and I'll report back. But there's other things we can use for it.
Yeah, and it's going to start telling me things I'm not going to be happy about, but it's going to be like, I think you've eaten enough tortilla chips today, Karl. I don't think you really need that al pastor taco. And I'm just going to ignore the advice and do an extra workout or something. But what about you, Erum? You also went to ChatGPT and used it for something that is specific to the episode we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So then I went on after hearing Ed's exercise in using ChatGPT for his health. And I'm like, you know what? I have been experimenting with different skincare routines based on what my friends are doing, things I see on videos or online. And I'm like, let me just ask ChatGPT to create a skincare routine for me. And I gave it some information about who I am and like did my skin type and my goals. Like, I want to look like the skin of a 25-year-old or 30-year-old. I don't want to be like an 18-year-old. I'm not trying to freak people out, Brian Johnson. But like, oh snap, I went there. But no, I'm just like, look, this is my goals. This is what I want to do. Like, please create a skincare routine for me that would work. And I always say please and thank you. It's just in my nature, even though it's an AI bot and doesn't care about my manners. I think maybe it does appreciate it. I don't know. Maybe not now, but it will. And it was like, all right, in the morning, you need to take boom, 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 boom. And it didn't do any brand names or anything like that. It was like, you need niacinamide, you need vitamin C, you need this. And first use this serum, and then use this, and then moisturizer, use this sunscreen. And then for the evening routine, it had different things. It just gave the active ingredients. It wasn't like you need this whole crazy formulation. And I was like, okay. And I had most of them, and I just got 2 more things. And like, now I'm like, all right, let me just do this. And it didn't just say products. It was like, you have to drink this much water. You have to do this. Be careful being out in the sun too long. And the things that you already know, obviously that's like an obvious one, but eating berries, eat more berries and things. And I was like, oh, okay.
How long ago did you do that?
I did it last week, started.
We will ask you about this in a couple of weeks. I find this fascinating, and it's the perfect transition to our episode because there is a lot of innovation happening in the skincare, personal beauty space. In the past, we've had a number of people on the podcast talking about personal care and beauty and like the impact that biotech is having on that. And I'm sure it's one of these topics that we're going to revisit a lot as we go forward. So today's episode is with Rocky Graziose of Estee Lauder. To us, it's super interesting. I hope you, the audience, find it super interesting because the big brands are innovating in ways that is so interesting. And then there's all the innovation that happens at the smaller brands. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation because there's a whole world of biotech beauty that's blowing up in terms of our world. I don't know if it's like really hit the mainstream. I'm not sure if these companies are going to lean in on the biology side of things, but hopefully they do. We are speaking to some companies, not going to mention any names, but when we are able to, we will. But I'm really excited about this interview with Rocky because it is going to blow your mind.
All right, let's let Rocky take it away. We are so excited to have you on the podcast today, Rocky Graziose. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, super excited to be here. So I've been following the podcast ever since we met. Super exciting stuff and really happy to help create some of the assets and material today.
Yeah, before we really get into it, tell us a little bit about you, your career journey, and your current role at the Estée Lauder Companies. I feel super privileged that we have someone from Estée Lauder on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm the first, right?
You are
Yes.
the first.
Okay. It's always good to be the first in something, right? So thanks for the intro. So technically trained, I have a PhD in plant natural products chemistry, which I got from Rutgers University in the Raskin lab. My PhD and my work there was focused on phytochemistry and early phase drug discovery from plants, which was really fun. And it set me off on my career path in industry to basically what I do now. So the journey took a couple of different stops. First, I was in the dietary supplements, food and beverage industry, where I ran a few R&D labs focused on product development, ingredient development, science in those spaces. I co-founded a plant-based dog supplement company, which was a lot of fun, got me experience as a founder. Didn't go quite the way I wanted it to, but I took away a lot of experience and knowledge from that, which I take with me to this day, which is great. And currently at the Estée Lauder Companies, where I've been for now 7 years. I sit within what's called the Advanced Technologies Pioneering Group, which is an upstream R&D group. It's a corporate group, and it's focused on supporting all of our brands, all 20 plus brands in skincare, hair care, makeup, and fragrance. And the remit of the organization it's multiple. So it's new technology discovery and development. So wrestling down all those interesting technologies, bringing them to the ground and helping to commercialize them. It's also asset development in all ways that you can think about it. So we're developing new targets, new modes of action, new ways to communicate our discoveries to the consumers. And we're also pushing the needle in many different areas of science, which I'm sure we'll hit on today. So I think of us as a corporate R&D powerhouse, so to say. That's what we do.
Wow. Estée Lauder is very lucky to have you. It's just amazing, your career journey. You're like one of the best people to talk to because you have the science background and the industry background, the business background, and the entrepreneurial background, which, as you know, we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. And it's also similar to how Estee Lauder operates. I mean, I love the story, but it's a huge company. And you guys have built a lot of brands or acquired them. So La Mer, MAC, Smashbox, The Ordinary, Origins. I could go on. And these are brands that I love and I purchased some of these products. So this is a real treat to speak with you. And they're all very successful brands. So could you tell me a little bit more about the story of entrepreneurship and how the story of Mrs. Estee Lauder started. That would be great for our listeners to know, because I don't think that story comes through a lot in modern times in a lot of the commercial activity. And how has Miss Estée Lauder shared enabled beauty? What is the philosophy behind beauty? So can you tell us some stories that you think the public misses when it comes to the Estée Lauder growth story?
Yeah, so we could talk about this for hours, but I think two things which you've noted and touched on that I think are important for the community to know are, one, that we're not just one brand, we're multiple brands. We're a portfolio of brands. Actually, the Estée Lauder Companies, plural, is a steward of over 20 plus brands in the prestige luxury market. And each one is unique in how they approach skincare, hair care, makeup, or fragrance in the areas that they work on. But they're all driven by one thing, just creating high quality products that push the boundary and really focused on consumer needs. The other thing, which I think we can get deeper into, is that despite this size, we're operating in over 120 different markets globally. Sales are quite large nowadays. We operate largely driven by that entrepreneurial nature of our founder, Mrs. Estée Lauder. Even where we sit, we're constantly challenged to be champions of creativity and innovation, much as she did when she started the company. Fun fact, over 75 years ago, when she started the company, she was literally making the products in her kitchen and getting them out in front of the consumers. That's the most important part to recognize, is that she was hands-on. We're challenged to this day to be hands-on, not only in discovering the technologies that drive our product, but also with interacting with the consumers to get that necessary feedback to continue to iterate and improve upon what we do. She was probably most famous in my eyes for that personal connection that she was able to make through that innovative work that she did. And that's why I think for me, it's super exciting to sit in the R&D part of this organization, which R&D in a general sense is challenged to be innovative. But within this organization, we're especially challenged to think outside the box and continue to drive home that heritage that we have as a company and as a portfolio of brands. So glad you asked the question. Super exciting to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting because on the one hand, beauty is skin deep, but it's pretty complicated. Everybody has these different skincare routines. I probably have the simplest one. Erum, yours is probably more complicated than mine is. But how does the biology of skin, which is biological and yet has all this chemistry beneath it, what do people require to take care of their skin? And what do people get wrong about skincare?
Yeah, as I shared, my background is in plant natural products chemistry. So I had a bit of a learning curve coming on to skin biology here. But you nailed it. I think the audience here doesn't have to be convinced that biology enables us all to be completely unique. And I think that's a given. The one thing that I think is important about skincare is that with the foundation that we're all so biologically unique and that our skin has biologically unique needs, we all have different ways in which we live. Day to day, the things that we do all require such different needs to be fulfilled. And that combination makes skincare so exciting. So, for example, we talked about this before we started the show. I have 3 young kids, 8, 4, and 2, and I'm responsible for getting them off to school in the morning every day. So I often have to choose, do I get a cup of coffee or do I wash my face? That's my skincare routine. Basically a choice between getting caffeinated for the day or cleaning my face. Others, who I'm very jealous of, can have a 20-step skincare routine every morning. They equate skincare to wellness and would take that over a cup of coffee. So the way that we approach skincare is to meet every customer on their own unique journey, where they are in that journey, and provide them with the optionality that they need to fulfill their needs at that given time. So like we said before, we have a portfolio of brands. Each brand has a really diverse and unique set of products that they can offer to the customers. Amongst all of our brands, you can imagine the many iterations of products that can be used to satisfy any of those needs the consumers have. And what we do is we try and educate along that journey so the consumer can make their best choices for their skincare. So I think that's why it's super exciting as we continue to uncover new things about skin, what it needs, share that information with the consumer, create products that fill those needs in a variety of ways. I think skincare remains endless in the way that we can deliver upon it. If I was to step up on my soapbox for a minute, there's really 3 things which I wish I was able to be better at myself in my busy life right now that you need to worry about with skincare. One is cleansing. I think is very, very important given the stresses that we have internally and externally in the world. The other is moisturization, really key to the way skin behaves. And the last is SPF. Now we're told in a number of ways that SPF is super important to aging in skin. So those are, for me at least, personally speaking, the 3 essentials of skincare. And there's lots of different ways to get to those 3 endpoints.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Beyond beauty, we're talking about a very large company that's making all sorts of different products at high volumes. And according to Gemini, 72% of executives believe that bio-based solutions can significantly accelerate progress towards sustainability goals. So how does Estée Lauder leverage biotechnology to address the increasing pressure for sustainable, biodegradable cosmetic products that the consumers are looking for?
Yeah, great question. I guess I could maybe answer it in a couple of different ways. The first, and I think this is important to be made known, is that our company is driven by what we call the green chemistry methodology. And it's something that we've pioneered with experts in the field. And it's really unique to us. And it takes a holistic approach to sustainability, because I think if you get too myopic on sustainability, you can sometimes get it wrong. So our company is very holistic about how we approach this with this green chemistry methodology. And it focuses on human health, ecosystem health, and the environment in totality. A number of metrics and scores go into it, but I think on the surface, you can imagine it like a holistic approach to making sure that we're doing the right thing by all of those different endpoints. And biotechnology we see as a key lever in this journey towards sustainability. And I think, again, getting back to the way that we're meeting the consumer and their journey and their skincare, we're also on a journey for sustainability. We're not going to say that we're perfect, but we continue to make iterative improvements, and biotechnology, huge tool to get us there. Personally speaking, again, with my background in plants, I think the supply chain and plant-based ingredients is really ripe for innovation in biotechnology. Because if you think about across the board, what we use from plants, a lot of the times we're really focused on a narrow set of the things that this plant creates. If you look at a tree, there's the trunk, which had taken years to grow, the branches equally as long to grow, the leaves, the fruits. Sometimes we're only taking a bit of that. And then from that bit, we often narrow down to maybe even one bioactive molecule that's important for us in skincare. And then you can think about these various waste streams that just go left oftentimes unused. Biotechnology, I think, enables us to really precisely narrow down on what we need and get to it in a really efficient way. And there's so many examples of this, but I think for me, that's how we're using biotechnology to really narrow down on that supply chain of what we need and get it very quickly and efficiently into our products.
Hi, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Messaging Lab, the force multiplier for biotech. Your biotech company is making the world a better place. You know that, we know that. But does the world? There's a big reason why some biotech companies attract investors, sign up customers, and get attention. That reason is strategic communications. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling narratives. And we have done that for the most successful biotech companies across healthcare, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice, visit messaginglab.com to explore how we can elevate your story and grow your business.
Yeah, it's such a great observation. I mean, we remind people all the time there is this drive for sustainable, natural ingredients, but there's not enough space on the planet to grow the plants that would supply that demand. So we're happy to hear that you guys, as well as so many other companies, are switching to sustainable alternatives. But what role do you see bioengineered ingredients playing besides just being able to not have to extract from existing plants or animals, particularly in skincare and fragrances?
Yeah, and so glad you asked that. I'm also curious. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to ask questions to you guys, but I'm curious how you're seeing it in other industries as well. But in our industry, I think what's driving us is that we have multiple stakeholders to satisfy. One of the primary objectives in skincare is to deliver benefits that consumers care about. I think sustainability is very, very important for a number of people for a number of reasons, but our products are generally used to deliver some benefit that the consumers can see in the mirror. So I think on the two sides of the same coin, when you're looking at this ability to generate plant-based products through biotechnology, you, number one, have the ability to mitigate the environmental impact that would have otherwise come from a traditional supply chain. But on the other side, you're able to optimize the efficacy in a way that you wouldn't be able to get through traditional techniques. You can deliver on ingredients that are X-fold more efficacious, that can be delivered better to the skin, to the places that they need to be delivered. And I think that is the other side of that coin that you're asking about. We have bioefficacy and sustainability that are driving in parallel toward really amazing endpoints.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm curious if you can point to specific examples at Estée Lauder where you have looked at the plant supply chain and said, hey, look, let's do this using biotechnology? Because we know, as you mentioned, the multiple effects, the multiple wins of biotechnology that we point out oftentimes in the podcast. But yes, the sustainability, but I'm a big fan of the efficacy. And if you have a very effective active compound, it could lead to less ingredients that were compensating for maybe another compound that wasn't functioning as well. So anything you can point to that could help us think about it?
Yeah, let me try and answer it because there's so many examples of how we're using this in our company. So one that's top of mind because we just recently went through an amazing launch with the Origins brand is in-house generated apple ferment. So it's a fermentation of an otherwise discarded apple peel from the food industry. It's coming from the waste. Apple cider vinegar, the applesauce industry generally just discards the peels. And we know from our childhood that an apple a day keeps the doctor, right? Full of these rich polyphenolic components that have strong antioxidant activity. However, the thought of putting dried up crushed apple peel on our skin is not generally aesthetically pleasing. Just doesn't seem to work. Also, the compounds can't be delivered so strongly into the skin because the skin is technically there to stop things like that from getting into our body.
Yeah, trust me, I tried. I tried putting the apple skins on my face, did not work.
Yeah. And I think we all have gone through that rite of passage, right?
Yeah.
So I'm with you there. But in any case, we know that there's really rich bioefficacious molecules locked into that peel. So our in-house fermentation team, which is second to none, was able to take that peel and unlock through a series of fermentation steps the bioactives and create an aesthetically pleasing ingredient that was able to be inserted directly into this product line. And it actually enhanced both the bioavailability and the efficacy of the ingredients. That's hopefully an answer to your question of a real specific way that we're taking what would otherwise be wasted or discarded, upcycling, if you would, if that's the right word for it, and then creating more value through biotechnology.
Wow.
I'm amazed by that story because it is something we talk about here on Grow Everything, this idea of waste as a resource. And hearing that a big company like Estée Lauder is doing that already, I think just serves as such a great example for people. And I think we expect to see a lot more of that. You mentioned that you have this internal fermentation group that you said is bar none one of the best. We're super interested in looking at learning more about them, especially since fermentation, like you just gave this example from the Origins, and allows you to make nature-friendly substitutes. What opportunities or challenges do you see in transitioning away from these traditional ingredients that maybe you are pulling apples from the tree, but instead now you're using the waste? What are some examples of other fermentation-based ingredients that you guys are excited about or have scaled?
Glad you're mentioning the internal team. This team has existed in our company for over 20 years. And like I said, I mean, they're one of the most fun groups to work with just because they're constantly pushing the bar, questioning the way we're doing things and doing them better in the future. And they're also the unsung heroes of the organization. Every brand uses one of the ingredients that comes out of this lab. So really, really key enabler of our ingredient success across our entire portfolio. I think what they're doing is twofold. They're going back to the roots of fermentation and creating better versions of what we've used throughout all of human history. So if you think about how integral fermentation is to everything we do, I mean, thinking on the glass of wine I had last night from the yogurt that I had this morning, everything that we do that's good in life is infused with fermentation, right? Wine, yogurt, beer. So what we do here with the team is rethink those traditional ingredients that are recognized throughout the world and improve upon them through the fermentation lab to make them more bioavailable, make them more accessible to skincare so that, Erum, you don't have to put apple peels on your face. You can have really a nice, clean, aesthetically pleasing product that goes on. That's on the one hand. And I think the challenges there are to continue to innovate in a space that's just been so established through tradition, to make sure you walk that fine line between why these things are used traditionally versus how we can reimagine them 2.0 in skincare. On the other hand, the team's really getting deep into precision fermentation. So on the complete other end of the spectrum, creating completely novel ingredients that have never, ever before been seen in our industry or in the world in general. And then how do you take those and quickly iterate upon them and get them into the market? So that's where I think the team is split in how they're approaching the fermentation world, but to the endpoints having equal impact on our organization. So like I said, really, really integral part of our organization and really developing innovative solutions for our consumers.
When you talk about precision fermentation, are there any examples that you can share Is there anything on the market that is derived from precision fermentation right now?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned it in your question. I didn't fully answer it. We're looking at these sources that some brands are choosing to steer away from, like animal-based sources of ingredients. So if you're talking about some of the extracellular matrix components like collagen, elastin, fibrillin, fibronectin, all these components that we know are essential for the skin, however, coming from animal sources are challenging for some brands to work with. I think that's a super exciting space. We've seen it happen with hyaluronic acid several years ago and how important that is. We're now seeing it with recombinant collagen growing. But I think really the sky's the limit in animal-based proteins through biotechnology and what they can do for skin. So that's one real easy example. And then the other one, we talked about it, but I'll just mention it again here. I think the plant-based side. Technology that has been with us for decades now, but just really, I think, picking up speed in the market. Understanding how plants can create novelty through liquid culture.
I think what's interesting about this is that in many cases, being able to do the precision fermentation and being able to produce an ingredient at a bigger scale kind of unlocks innovation in ways that maybe the formulators or the scientists didn't think of. And you said hyaluronic acid, which if I remember correctly, was initially extracted from rooster combs. But I have always been under the impression that the fact that it was fermented and that you had a lot more of it available made it available as the product that we see across the board in cosmetics. Is that generally accurate, that analysis?
Yeah, I took it for granted, but I should have been clear, and I'm glad you were clear on that, is that's exactly the history of that ingredient. Another great example is squalene that used to come from shark cartilage, and now it's coming from biotechnology, really pervasive and important ingredient. Collagen is the most recent one that was coming from animal byproducts and now coming from fermentation and biotech. So you're spot on, is that this ability to generate not only equivalent, but better versions of the animal sourced ingredients is unlocking skincare in a really unique way. And I think digging into that a little bit deeper, what this also affords us is the ability to put some constraints or unlock problems way early on in the development process. So if you think about solubility or the aesthetic qualities that are inherent in our products, you can bake those into the ingredient rather than have to formulate around them from restricted ingredients that you get elsewhere. So that's a huge unlock for this technology as well.
Yeah, that's incredible because sustainability is definitely a conversation that's been happening because of climate change. Of course, it's a big thing for biotech, but I love how you're talking about the new functionality and instead of formulating around an ingredient, which I think I will use that going forward, you're able to perhaps create like a super squalene or a super collagen that can do more than if you just extracted it from a plant or from an animal, which is just phenomenal. And the fact that you're using precision fermentation, it's very cutting edge. But I'm also curious in terms of your R&D processes, what are the other ways that Estée Lauder is incorporating automation or computer-aided design? And I have to ask, because we're all asking, how are you using AI?
Yeah, great question. And personally speaking, every day I see something on LinkedIn or Twitter or somewhere that just fascinates me about AI. Mm-hmm. So I think this is just my personal perspective. I think we're living in a fascinating time. I think you guys would agree, all the cool technologies we're seeing. So love it that we're able to incorporate it into what we're doing. And I think especially the interface of AI and beauty is an exciting place to be. The way we're using it is, I think, really strategic. And it's essentially to continue to build on the core strengths and strategies that we have. It's not distracting us and taking us in new directions. It's literally building what we've chosen to do for a long time now. And that's deliver high quality, high efficacy, high performance products to all of our consumers in a way that makes them excited to use them. We've also been doing this and partnering with the leading experts in the industry for quite a while. So announced partnerships with Microsoft, MIT, and we're using those to really enhance our agility, speed, and efficiency across the board. So particularly in our world, in the R&D world, there's three things that we're doing. One is social listening, when we're doing that better. So understanding the consumer. The second is ingredient development. And the last is formulation. So just unpacking those for a second. So social listening, like I said, Estée Lauder was hands-on with all of her consumers. She was there at the counter, at people's homes, understanding what they liked, what they disliked about products, and taking that back to make her own products better. AI is supercharging this for us. The ability to canvas our global set of consumers, what they like, what they don't like, and get that back into a really short cycled product development time is fascinating for us. So that's on the far front end. Then if you think about ingredient development, I mean, this goes to probably all the things that you've talked about with others on the show, is AI is just unlocking science and target discoveries and ingredient optimization in ways that are really accelerated. That's what we do. We have to understand what's the next target in skincare that we want to go after. So AI is helping us discover that. How do we find ingredients that really hit those targets in an effective way? And then all this data that we generate from these activities, how do we quickly get to the bottom of it and make it make sense for us? So new ingredients, and then those ingredients have to be put into formulations. Like we were saying before, is not just you stick it in a jar and then take it to the store. You have to literally take sometimes 20, 30, 40 ingredients and have them play nice together in a way that delivers an aesthetic appeal for the consumer and also enhances the inherent qualities of those individual ingredients through synergy, through increased delivery. Also, they have to be stable. They have to be shelf stable. The product ingredients don't have to degrade. So all these things are really enhanced by our ability to lock into new ways to use AI.
Yeah, I would think that in every one of those steps, AI can be very much of an accelerant. And even just thinking about the supply chain, we started off talking about producing ingredients via fermentation or precision fermentation, all the way to formulating with AI. I think every single one of those has to be a step that could be done faster, better, more efficaciously than the traditional way.
Yeah, and that's just a few that are closer to our world. And just again, to really drive home, this is just a tool to continue to make us better at what we've chosen to do forever. Mrs. Estée Lauder herself was doing this. Now we're able to do it with AI as a tool, but that's really where we set our course.
Yeah, I'm going to speculate a little bit just because I wanted to have a comment. So a book that Erum and I talk a lot about is The Genesis Machine by Amy Webb and Andrew Hessel. And in the book, there's a couple of different fictional scenarios that are speculations as a way to help people understand the way that the biotech revolution will impact their lives. And one in particular calls out Estée Lauder and another big cosmetics company is doing work around longevity. Last year, you guys launched a skin longevity platform. And so we were super curious about that platform and how is it measured? How's skin longevity measured so that we know how different products work?
Yeah. Yep. That platform was launched through the Estée Lauder brands. Really, really impactful. But it's really one of the most recent examples of how our company has continued to pioneer in longevity. Again, going back to our founder, Mrs. Estée Lauder, she was way ahead of her time in so many ways. And one of the things that's really important to recognize is that she changed the way that we think about aging. She allowed confidence to accompany aging. This idea that aging doesn't have to be something that you shy away from, but that you fully embrace it and you want to age gracefully. So this idea of longevity is about two things: understanding that aging is inevitable in certain ways, but also there's certain ways that we could not only stop aging, but reverse it. So it's kind of this dichotomy between we want to make sure that we're confident in how we do age and allow the customers to choose what that looks like, but also uncover the biological truths of aging and in some ways reverse that, right? So that's what this skin longevity platform does. It takes this dichotomy and pairs it together through really cutting edge science. So it's internally led by one of our leading experts in the space, Dr. Nadine Pernaday. Her and her team have hundreds of patents and dozens of publications in the space. So really true industry leaders, not just internal leaders. And what we've done is we've collected a consortium of experts all in their individual fields around longevity and just continued the conversation. The idea is to continue to educate and empower consumers about how they think or even rethink skincare and lifestyle and change the conversation from aging is bad to confidence in aging and also, when necessary, reversing that aging. So the nuances of the exact measurements that we're using, I don't know that I can fully discuss here, but just suffice it to say that we've published on many of them. The idea that we can very accurately measure in skin the time course of aging. And we've also been able to uncover those targets that allow us to reverse that. So super exciting stuff. And I think, again, just an example of how the course has been chartered by Mrs. Estée Lauder, and we continue to just improve upon it every day and get better and better as an organization.
Wow, that's incredible. And this consortia for this longevity platform, is it just solely focused on skin, or is there nutrition a part of it, or lifestyle?
So the experts, I don't have the list with me, but certainly afterward I can get them. But the experts have been gathered from all disparate fields focused on longevity. And yes, longevity is not only just within the skin, it's the holistic approach to understanding how all different things affect longevity. But what we bring to the table is truly that skin expertise. If everyone has a seat at the table for their recognizable achievements in longevity, ours is the one from the skin perspective.
Yes. Oh, wow. Okay, cool. We'll definitely have to look into that. That's so exciting. I mean, we had an episode a couple of weeks ago about biohacking, and there's people that are very like, we can live forever, but we won't go down that rabbit hole right now. So, when I first met you at Synbio Beta, which is such a fun conference, and we had talked after that, and it really got us very excited about the future of biotech and beauty and skincare. And we talked a little bit about how Estee Lauder works with startups or collaborates or engages with startups. And you had mentioned the new incubation ventures team. Can you tell us a little bit more about how Estee Lauder engages with startups and perhaps some success stories that have come out of the new incubation ventures or other technologies? Or we'll have to understand a little bit more about the startup ecosystem that Estee Lauder engages with.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to make sure I convey here is that we're a very approachable company. Hopefully, I've convinced you through our conversation that I'm a generally nice person to talk to. So I hope
Yes.
no one would be afraid to come and say hi to me and introduce themselves. And it's the same with most of our company. So I think the entry points into the company are multiple through many different people, organizational groups, and whatnot. However, our group in particular interfaces with startup brands through a number of partners internally. So we have a group called External Innovation, who manages direct lines of contact with many startups and outside organizations. And we also have the NIV group, the New Incubation Ventures, which you mentioned, as well as some other supporting groups that really allow us to holistically support this startup ecosystem and how they engage with the Estee Lauder companies. Because I can imagine also it could be intimidating to come to us. So we want to make sure that we break down barriers wherever possible and make those conversations super easy to have. The New Incubation Ventures group, it's really, for lack of a better term, the corporate venture capital group. Their strategic early phase investment and incubation arm for the companies. Their remit is to support the forward-thinking founders in beauty and adjacent industries to help create new businesses and new companies, to fund the existing ones and support these emerging brands and also new business models in any way that they can. And they really do this because, number one, I think collectively supporting this beauty industry and ecosystem is important for everybody. But the other is to create this diversified portfolio of brands that are complementary to our existing brands. So that's really their remit. They're super fun to work with. Actually, I would love to introduce you to them, Shauna, Rondava, and the team. They probably have their own separate podcast that's way more interesting than mine. So I should introduce you to them. A lot to talk about. And they're really propelling, I think, the way that we think about the beauty ecosystem in so many ways.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any startups you can mention? I mean, I'm sure we can all check the website, but since we're in everyone's ear right now, anything you can share so we can have some ideas?
So a lot of what they focus on is consumer-facing brands, which again, the portfolio is really robust and I wouldn't do justice to go off one by one. But I think one of the exciting things that I've seen them do is they kind of create these beauty ecosystems where everyone comes together in a really exciting way to drive innovation. So there's one, for example, it's called Beauty in You. It's a competitive program that's run in India. And the goal is really to find the next generation entrepreneurs in India. So it's a competitive program. People submit from the brand side, the technology side, their applications, and they're given non-dilutive awards. They're also given mentorship and networking that enhances this beauty network solely in India, and super successful. In that region alone, there's been, I think, over 300 different applicants, many awards. It's going on its third year. It's a really strong example of how they can insert themselves into a beauty ecosystem and prop the whole thing up.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Since you work in the biotech beauty industry and you see all these brands and all these products, what products do you use? I know you can't use much because I know you're very busy. It's with 3 kids. I can only imagine the madness at home.
It's interesting because I'm so embedded in the product development life cycle that oftentimes I'm using the pre-production product. We're assessing things. We're making sure that they feel right. So actually, most of my beauty routine is products that are in development.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that. That's crazy. Any of those products that you're like, wow, this works, and now it's a big seller?
So, I mean, just literally on the heels of the conversation we've had about the Youthopia product line with Origins, it's the one that based on the apple ferment. Love that product. You guys got to try it. I'll try and get you some samples. It's doing very, very well in the market. I think because it has a really nice balance of those two things we talked about. Hard-hitting, efficacious ingredients, the ones we've developed in-house, and also a really beautiful aesthetic that's not exactly the scent of an apple, but reminiscent of a fantasy apple. So it pairs aesthetics really nicely with the hard-hitting technology that drives really good efficacy. And that's the one that we've been practicing with for quite a while. So I'm using the real product now, but I went through many iterations of the trial versions.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I definitely can't wait to use that. So one of the things that's coming up, we met at Symbio Beta. Are you going again in 2025?
Yeah. Yep. We'll be attending. Have to start thinking on the plans for sure. And I think you guys are both, right?
Yeah. And one of the things I'm particularly interested in is talking about CPG 2030, 2035. And I'm sure you guys have some interesting ideas about what that's going to look like from your point of view.
Yeah, I think what's going to be really exciting is to see how we leveraged crowdsourced information. If you think about how these beauty ecosystems are coming together in some instances to literally create product, there's some structures in which voting happens and this decentralized product development is super exciting. We're reaching this point again where AI is driving so many things so fast. And we're also seeing tremendous increases in ingredient efficacy. I just can't wait to see how that looks like in 5 to 10 years from now. We're going to start to see some really breakthrough performance on ingredients and product, I think, over the next 5 years. That's going to narrow the gap between alternative industries that our consumers go to for solutions and what we can provide.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I know the 20 brands and we love all of them equally, but one of the brands that really I thought was very interesting on how they market is Ordinary. There's a whole other conversation we can have just about the marketing side of Estée Lauder and how you market products in terms of putting a little bit of a biotech spin on it and how biotechnology enables different labeling. So if you have a more efficacious ingredient, it's like less ingredients on the label. And I think Ordinary, they have positioned themselves to be like that, where they just try to keep a simple, like simplicity is in their core.
Yeah.
Even their advertising, like on the trains here in New York City, is just a molecule. And they keep their ingredients list very small and everything's very uniform. They've taken off. And I learned about them through my younger friends and family. So I thought that was incredibly interesting. And I'm not sure if you know how they're leveraging biotechnology.
Yeah, so they're fully part of our portfolio and family of brands now. It's super exciting to have them because I think over the years, we've seen mutual growth when these acquisitions are made. We learn, I think, bilaterally by the way that we've operated in the past, and I think all come together in a new way. I don't think one gets fully integrated into another and starts operating differently. I think we all operate in a new space. You're right. The Ordinary, Decium, their philosophy, I think, is going to impact how the rest of the brands operate. And then vice versa. I think they'll learn and grow a lot by integrating into the portfolio. So it's exciting. I'm glad to see you see some of their ads. I love them too. I love the simplicity of it. I think it's really, especially as a scientist, it makes sense. Not just the words, but the molecules themselves, right? So super cool to see that and glad you've seen it and been affected by it.
You mentioned new functionalities, novel functional molecules. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of that, whether it's through them or some of the other brands, because I just think that there's so much creativity and opportunity when it comes to taking existing molecules and making them more efficacious, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the tools that are made accessible nowadays through biotechnology and the spaces that you guys are so tuned into is just really exciting. Again, I think next couple of years is going to be an amazing time to be working in this space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on, Rocky. I mean, I feel like we have done a great service to our listeners. I mean, a lot of people have come to us and talked to us about biotech beauty brands, how CPG is working, how they're thinking about biotechnology and biology, and to hear from you and how you're excited about it and the things that are going on at Estée Lauder and the 20 brands. It's a huge help for us to think about it, especially to hear the wins, because this also helps us think of a brighter future as we shift away from older ways of doing things that might not have been as sustainable, but to ways that are better for ourselves, our health, and our environment. So thank you so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
In the reciprocal way, I really appreciate being a part of this. I think the community that you've built and have got excited about this is just so impressive. So very happy to create content and hopefully make some new friends out of this, right? I think that's the idea, is that this community continues to grow. And I think with the power that is behind all of us, I think the sky's the limit in what's next.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rocky. Really appreciate it.
So, Karl, what'd you think of that episode?
Rocky's great. It's just such a pleasure to get him on. And I think we could probably say that Rocky is one of the first people we've had from a really big company like that. And I think we're going to get more of those kinds of interviews as more big companies turn to biotech for solutions. And I was just really surprised by some of the things that Rocky said.
Yeah, I also really appreciate how Rocky had brought back what's happening today to what Mrs. Estée Lauder did in the early days. He really grounded the narrative on the early beginnings of Estée Lauder. I think a lot more companies can do that, should do that. I know obviously we work with a lot of early stage companies. I mean, they are in those early stages, but it helps ground it because when you look at a company like Estée Lauder or some of these other big multi-brand companies, you start seeing them as a thing. Like they're just some big monster that's extracting resources and making products that are going all over the world. But it started somewhere. And it started with this woman who had a vision, who really stood true to that vision. And it continues to permeate through Estée Lauder and their brands of being just very innovative, thoughtful about what beauty means, about confidence, about feeling great, and how they're looking at taking it to the next level. Because as, again, supply chains are at risk, there's limited resources, looking to precision fermentation and these other technologies are necessary. But how are we going to leverage it in a way that adds increased functionality? I'm so excited to try that apple mask, the apple ferment. I had gone apple picking this past weekend and I have a bunch of apples. So I know I could blend them up and make a mask, but I'd rather just use what Estée Lauder has made and keep it clean and keep it effective. So
we talk about startups a lot all the time, but I think we should make it clear that we also do work with large companies on biostrategy. We have a whole episode where we talk specifically about biostrategy. But one of the things that we've learned over the years, and Erum, you can back me up on this, is that everybody wants to know what the other side is doing. So all the startups want to know what the big companies are doing. All the big companies want to know what startups are doing. We're lucky to be in the middle and to also do that in a way that is very confidential and ethical. And you talked about making introductions to people. That is something that we do if it makes sense for the businesses we're working with. And I think it's very exciting.
There's so much happening in biology, and for a large company to reframe and reposition themselves as a biology-driven company requires a whole communication strategy about biology and what it means. And so that one of the projects we do is really get everyone internal to a company, and these companies could have 50,000, 100,000 people to understand why biology is important, why it's necessary, why it's high functioning and high performing, and how people on their teams are already using biology and how they can level up. really getting the internal alignment on what's going on in biotech when it comes to talking to companies in the CPG space or otherwise. Really, it's been really exciting because you see people's eyes light up, the bulb on top of their head goes off. They have all these ideas because they've been working so hard in the space and whatever they're working on, and they're kind of stuck, right, if they're not innovating. And so to be able to look at a whole new platform, which we're calling biology here or biotechnology, completely changes the way that they think. So it's been very amazing to be working with companies that don't identify as biotech, but are looking to biologize.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We talk about K18 hair as being an innovator in biotech. We had this whole conversation about hyaluronic acid with Rocky and how having quantities of that available made it an ingredient that has been innovated around. So there is a lot to do and a lot to discover when it comes to skincare and beauty and personal care and the application of biotech to all of those, not just on the supply chain side, but as has been proven on the functionality side. So I think that super excited to see where this goes. I also enjoyed the part of the conversation where you talked about longevity. We mentioned the Genesis machine, which we've mentioned a lot on this podcast. And there is a section in there that talks about the big brands, Estee Lauder and L'Oreal, getting into longevity. They mentioned that they do have a longevity forum, which I really don't know very much about, but I would like to learn more.
Yeah. And how they're going to bring other innovation in. Rocky, when you meet him, he's like super cool. So it might be intimidating some people. Like anyone that works at a luxury brand, a prestige brand, you're like, oh man, they're so cool. And he is, but he's also very approachable. And I think he's just trying to make that clear to our network and our listeners here. if you're working on an innovation that's well developed and you're going to market with it, and go talk to Estée Lauder, go talk to Rocky, go talk to their different teams. As you mentioned, a few programs, opportunities where you can engage as an early stage company.
I mean, Rocky is, like you said, very open, and it brings us full circle to what we talked about at the beginning of the episode, where we're talking about mentor relationships, and having those mentors at big companies can be very useful for some companies. And Rocky, being very approachable, is probably one of those people. So I'm so happy Rocky was on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to seeing him again soon and seeing the progress that Estée Lauder makes in this space.
Yes. So for more information about Estée Lauder and the work that they're doing, please refer to our show notes, where we also have our contact information, so you can reach out to us with any questions. We mentioned that we were going to create this episode about mentorship, so feel free to reach out to us about that. We're always looking to grow our community. We would welcome you to be a part of our Patreon community. The link is also in our show notes. We are excited to grow that a bit more. And I think that's it. Anything, Karl?
No, that's the pod.
That's the pod.